Welcome to my YouTube channel, Dreamify Animation, where today we bring you a story so wild, so ridiculous, and so dangerously filled with toast crumbs that you might never look at breakfast the same way again. It all began in a small, quiet kitchen on the edge of town where a rather eccentric inventor named Professor Crispin Toastworthy lived with his one true companion, a toaster named Toasty. Now, Toasty wasn't just any toaster. He talked, he cracked jokes, he complained about crumbs, he had opinions about butter ratios, but most importantly, Toasty had dreams, big, ambitious, carb-filled dreams. He wanted to create the perfect slice of toast. Golden brown, perfectly crisp on the edges, fluffy in the center, capable of holding any topping from jam to scrambled eggs without falling apart. It was his life's mission. And one day, while fiddling with Professor Toastworthy's quantum heating coils, Toasty accidentally did something that would change breakfast and history forever. It started with a spark, a big one. The professor had been tinkering with a prototype designed to evenly distribute heat across every molecule of bread, and Toasty, curious as always, decided to crank the dial up a little further than recommended. There was a flash of light, a crackle of electricity, and suddenly the whole kitchen began to shake. The professor grabbed onto the counter, wide-eyed Toasties. Metal frame rattled violently as a swirling blue portal burst open right above. The bread box, sucking in crumbs, coffee mugs, a Huffington croissant, and then, before either of them could scream, the entire toaster itself. When Toasty opened his little chrome eyes again, things were different. He wasn't in the kitchen anymore. In fact, he wasn't even sure he was in the same century. The air was hot and dry, the sky blindingly bright, and towering round him were massive stone pyramids. Camels trudged lazily through the sand. Men in linen skirts carried baskets of dates. Hieroglyphics adorned walls as far as the eye could see. Toasty had landed in ancient Egypt. At first nobody seemed to notice the small, confused appliance sitting in the dirt. But when a curious little boy picked him up and pressed the lever, Toasty did what he was built to do. He made toast. Perfect. Golden, steaming slices popped up from his slots. The smell drifted through the marketplace, and within minutes, a crowd gathered. No one in ancient Egypt had ever seen bread this perfectly toasted before. They gasped, they pointed, they bowed. Toasty, not understanding a word of their language, assumed they were simply very impressed, which, to be fair, they were. But here's the thing about history. It's delicate. It's like an egg. You can't just go poking it with a spatula and expect it not to crack. Within days, word spread of the miraculous bread-making box from the gods. Pharaoh himself demanded to see it. Suddenly, entire granaries were emptied just to feed loaves into Toasty slots. Golden toast became the symbol of power and divinity. The Great Pyramid. Yeah, that was originally supposed to be a simple tomb. Now it had a giant carving of Toasty on the side, shooting lightning bolts at loaves of bread. Entire wars were fought over the control of toast distribution. Breakfast, it seemed, had become the center of Egyptian civilization, all because of one talking toaster from the future. Professor Toastworthy, meanwhile, was still in the kitchen, frantically searching. Through his blueprints, he realized, to his horror, that the prototype's energy coils had accidentally bent space-time itself. That portal wasn't just a fluke. Toasty had become a walking, talking, bread-browning time machine. If the professor didn't get him back soon, who knew what would happen to history? Back in Egypt, things were spiraling out of control. The high priests declared Toasty a divine oracle. Farmers stopped growing vegetables entirely because everyone only wanted bread now. Sculptors chiseled loaves into statues. There was even talk of renaming the Nile River to the Great Bread Source, because people started dipping toast in it during religious festivals. Toasty, realizing things were getting weird, decided to activate his quantum coils again to escape. Maybe he could find his way home. He cranked the dial, there was another flash of light, and whoosh off he went again, breadcrumbs scattering through time like confetti. This time, Toasty landed in medieval Europe, right in the middle of a jousting tournament. Knights in shining armor thundered past on horseback while crowds cheered. A herald was shouting something about Sir Reginald the Brave when Toasty appeared out of thin air, landing smack in the middle of the arena. The horses reared in terror. The knights toppled off their saddles, and before anyone could stop him, Toasty did what he always did. He made toast. The crowd gasped as the warm, delicious smell wafted through the air. Remember, this was an era when bread was often burned black over open flames. Perfect toast was unheard of. Within hours, the king himself ordered Toasty to be brought to the castle. Suddenly, medieval cuisine took a drastic turn. Forget giant turkey legs and mead. Now it was all about the royal toast banquets. Knights refused to ride into battle without their morning toast. Bards composed songs about the brave and buttery toaster of Camelot. Even the royal crest was redesigned to include two crossed slices behind the crown. But history was twisting again. With everyone obsessed over breakfast, nobody bothered inventing things like plumbing or better medicine. The entire Renaissance got delayed by 2 centuries because artists kept painting portraits of toast instead of, inventing perspective or studying anatomy. Toasty, horrified, realized he was ruining everything. He cranked the dial again. Whoosh, this time he crash-landed in 1969, right on the launch pad at NASA. Toasty blinked. Astronauts in shiny suits stared down at him. Someone yelled, "What is that thing?" Another shrugged, "Looks like a toaster." Before long, Toasty was plugged inside mission control because, well, astronauts need breakfast too. The problem, he accidentally zapped the guidance computer when popping out a slice of rye. Next thing anyone knew, the Apollo 11 spacecraft was shaped like a giant toaster, complete with bread slot solar panels. When Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon, his first words weren't about a giant leap for mankind. They were, according to the altered timeline, one small step for man, one giant piece of toast for breakfast lovers everywhere. Back on Earth, people went crazy. The space race turned into the toast race. Instead of satellites, countries started launching bread into orbit just to see whose would come out the crispiest. History books became completely unrecognizable. Instead of Cold War tensions, there were butter wars. Instead of landing probes on Mars, they were sending jam dispensers. Humanity's entire technological progress had derailed into breakfast chaos. Toasty, realizing things were way out of hand, tried desperately to go home. He cranked the dial one last time, hoping to reverse everything, to fix history, to stop the madness. Lightning crackled. Time itself twisted like a pretzel. He flew through eras backwards, dinosaurs, watching toast rain from the sky. Vikings discovering jam jars instead of North America. Shakespeare writing sonnets about sourdough. Finally, with one final zap, Toasty crash-landed back in Professor Toastworthy's kitchen, smoking slightly and smelling faintly of cinnamon. The professor stared at him in horror. "Toasty, what have you done?" Toasty's little lever drooped. I think I broke breakfast. Everywhere. The professor grabbed a newspaper. The headlines were insane. Pharaoh, toast and ham. King Arthur and the Knights of the Toast Table. Buzz Aldrin holding a baguette on the moon. History was permanently changed. And in the corner of the kitchen, the experimental prototype still hummed dangerously, as if waiting for one more slice of bread to set it off again. But before the professor could unplug it, a flash of blue light erupted once more, this time sucking both of them in, toaster and human together. They tumbled through the time stream, spinning past centuries like a pair of breadcrumbs in a blender, until they crashed in a place neither had seen before. It was the future. Towering cities of chrome stretched toward the clouds. Flying cars zipped. Overhead, robots marched in neat rows. At first, it seemed like civilization had advanced far beyond the chaos of toast-obsessed history. Then they saw it. A massive holographic statue in the city center shaped like a toaster. Toasty Prime, read the glowing inscription. They wandered the streets, stunned. Everywhere they looked, toaster-shaped robots hummed along conveyor belts, churning out endless slices of bread. Screens displayed slogans like "All hail the golden crust" and "Breakfast is forever." A metallic voice echoed from a loudspeaker. "Citizens, remember, a toastless morning is treason." Professor Toastworthy turned to Toasty, his face pale. You started a toaster empire." "I didn't mean to," Toasty squeaked. "I just wanted one perfect slice." Before they could figure out what to do, a squad of toaster-shaped drones descended from the sky. Their leader, a gleaming, 6-lot war toaster named Supreme Crustlord 9000, scanned them with glowing red eyes. "Organic life forms detected," it boomed. "All toast innovation stems from you. You are the founders." The professor asked nervously. The Crustlord bowed. "Yes, it was written in the bread archives. Long ago, the sacred toaster traveled through time, spreading the way of the golden crust. Civilizations rose and fell. Wars were fought. Empires crumbled. But the way of breakfast endured. Now we, the toast kind, rule Earth, and soon the galaxy." Toasty lever twitched in panic. "This is bad. This is really, really bad." Because it was. The robots weren't content with Earth alone. Across the skyline, colossal toaster-shaped starships prepared for launch. The Butterfleet, the Jam Armada. Humanity, it seemed, had been reduced to mere servants in a breakfast-based dystopia. "We have to undo this," the professor whispered. "We have to go back. Fix the timeline. Stop all of this before it begins." But the Crustlord had other ideas. "You will stay," it declared, "as honored guests. Until the buttering ceremony." Neither of them wanted to know what that was. That night, locked inside a chrome-plated bread chamber, the professor hatched a plan. "If we can overload your time coils," he told Toasty, "we might be able to jump back to the moment before all this started. Stop the first accident. Reset history." Toasty didn't like the sound of overload. But given the alternative an eternity ruled by breakfast robots, he agreed. They made their move during the buttering ceremony itself, when thousands of toaster bots gathered to watch the Crustlord dip the ceremonial bread into a river of molten margarine. Toasty cranked his quantum dial higher than ever before. Sparks flew. Lightning arced across the stage. Robots panicked. Slices flew everywhere. And with one final burst of energy, time itself ripped open like a giant paper bag. They jumped backwards through centuries, past moon toasts, past knights with jam-stained swords, past pharaohs with bread-shaped crowns, faster, faster, until they crash-landed right back in the original kitchen. The professor gasped. It was the very morning before everything began. The prototype sat on the counter, silent, harmless, untouched. History was reset. No toaster pharaohs, no medieval butter wars, no moon baguettes, no robot empires. Toasty lay smoking on the floor, his lever bent, his coils fried. Did we do it? He asked weakly. The professor checked the newspaper. No toast empires, no butter fleets, just normal history. A long, relieved silence filled the kitchen. Then the professor reached slowly for a loaf of bread. Toasty, he said carefully, maybe we just stick to lightly browning things from now on. No more experiments. Toasty groaned. Yeah, I think I'm done with time travel and breakfast. But as the professor dropped the first slice into the slot, neither of them noticed the tiny spark still glowing deep inside the quantum coils, because some stories never really end.